The bell above the door chimed. Leo didn't look up. Table 3 ordered another pot of jasmine, he called, carefully pouring steaming amber tea into a porcelain cup. You already knew? I have heirs. His younger cousin laughed as he hurried away with the tray. Morning sunlight spilled through the windows of Willow Tea House, warming polished wooden tables and shelves lined with tins from every corner of the empire. Merchants chatted over breakfast, elderly couples played board games, and travelers rested before continuing their journeys. Leo preferred it this way, quiet, predictable, just tea. He wiped the counter clean before opening a fresh tin. The rich scent of roasted oolong filled the room. Perfect. If you keep sniffing the leaves like that, an old regular teased, you're going to marry your tea before you marry a person. Leo smiled without looking up. Tea doesn't lie. The customers burst into laughter. He's got you there. You've been trying to set him up for years. The old man shook his head dramatically. Such a handsome omega. 23 already. Every matchmaker in the capital has visited this shop. And every one left disappointed, Leo replied. Marriage sounded exhausting, especially noble marriages. He'd seen enough wealthy customers to know exactly what palace life looked like. Rules. Bowing. Smiling when you wanted to scream. He wanted none of it. His dream was much smaller. Expand the tea house. Create his own signature blends. Maybe open another shop in a neighboring town someday. That sounded far more exciting than marrying some arrogant alpha with too much money and too little personality. The bell rang again. A man in royal blue entered. Every conversation stopped. The embroidered golden phoenix on his cloak announced his identity before he even spoke. An imperial messenger. Leo sighed internally. Please don't be here. For me. The messenger scanned the room. Leo Ashford. So much for hope. Leo stepped forward. I'm Leo. The messenger unrolled a scroll sealed with crimson wax. By order of His Imperial Majesty, Willow Tea House is commanded to provide refreshments for the royal founding banquet 3 nights from now. The room collectively gasped. The palace? The royal banquet? That's an incredible honor. Leo wasn't nearly as enthusiastic. There must be a mistake. There isn't. We're just a neighborhood tea house. The Emperor specifically requested your jasmine blend. Leo blinked. The Emperor drinks my tea? The palace has purchased it anonymously for years. That explained the mysterious monthly orders. The messenger handed him the scroll. Failure to appear is considered refusal of an imperial command. So, I don't actually have a choice. No, the messenger bowed politely before leaving. Silence lingered until the door closed. Then the tea house exploded. Leo! You're serving the royal family. This is huge. You'll meet the Crown Prince. Leo groaned. I'd rather meet another shipment of tea leaves. More laughter. His cousin leaned over the counter. You hate this already, don't you? I haven't even gone yet. You could meet a handsome alpha. I could also trip over expensive carpet and embarrass myself in front of half the empire. His cousin grinned. I think that's more likely. Leo threw a towel at him. 3 nights later. The imperial palace was even larger than the stories claimed. Marble corridors stretched endlessly beneath glittering chandeliers. Servants hurried through the halls carrying silver trays while musicians tuned their instruments somewhere beyond towering golden doors. Leo adjusted his sleeves. I don't belong here. A palace servant smiled politely. This way, Master Leo. They entered the enormous banquet hall. Hundreds of nobles filled the room. Silks shimmered beneath crystal lights. Jewels sparkled. Laughter echoed beneath painted ceilings. Leo had never seen so much wealth gathered in one place. He focused on what mattered, the tea. He arranged each porcelain pot with practiced precision, ignoring curious glances from passing nobles. 1 pot, 2 cups, fresh leaves, steady hands. Tea was simple. People were complicated. As he reached for the final tray, a strange sweetness drifted through the air. Leo frowned. That scent. It wasn't tea. His heartbeat skipped. Warmth spread through his body. Too quickly. Too intensely. His fingers tightened around the porcelain handle. No, his vision blurred. Someone brushed past him. Another unfamiliar scent surrounded him. Alphas. Too many alphas. His breathing became uneven. An impossible thought flashed through his mind. I'm going into heat. Here. Now. In the middle of the royal banquet. The porcelain tray slipped from his trembling hands. It shattered across the marble floor. The entire hall fell silent. The sound of breaking porcelain echoed through the banquet hall. Every conversation stopped. Dozens of heads turned. Leo stumbled backward, one hand gripping the edge of the table as another wave of heat crashed over him. No, this wasn't possible. His heat wasn't due for another 3 months. The sweet scent pouring from his body grew stronger by the second. Gasps spread through the hall. An omega. He's in heat. At the banquet? Several young alphas instinctively stepped forward. Before anyone could reach him, stand back. The voice was calm, cold, absolute. The crowd immediately parted. Leo looked up through blurred vision. The Crown Prince Alexander Aurelius. Tall, dressed in black ceremonial robes embroidered with silver dragons, his expression unreadable. His piercing gray eyes swept over the room before settling on Leo. For a brief moment, irritation flashed across his face. Not at Leo. At the situation. The prince pulled off his cloak and draped it over Leo's shoulders, shielding him from the hungry stares filling the room. Everyone leave. No one moved. I gave an order. The command carried enough authority that nobles immediately began filing out. Guards escorted the remaining alphas away while servants hurried to close the banquet hall doors. Within moments, only the prince, a royal physician, and 2 trusted guards remained. The physician knelt beside Leo, checking his pulse. His face paled. Your Highness. This isn't a natural heat. Alexander's gaze sharpened. What do you mean? Someone used a heat-inducing drug. Silence. Leo forced himself to breathe through the dizziness. I didn't. I know, Alexander interrupted. The physician looked between them, clearly alarmed. The drug is unusually strong. Suppressants won't work. Leo felt his stomach sink. There was only one way to stop it. The physician lowered his voice. If this continues, every alpha in the palace will smell him. Alexander closed his eyes briefly, as though weighing impossible choices. When he opened them again, the decision had already been made. Everyone outside. The physician hesitated. Your Highness, now. The room emptied. Only Leo and Alexander remained. Leo clutched the cloak tighter. I'm sorry. Alexander looked at him. You've apologized 3 times. I ruined your banquet. You were poisoned. People will still blame me. They'll blame whoever benefits from this. Leo managed a weak laugh. You have more faith in the court than I do. I don't. It was the first honest thing the prince had said all evening. Leo looked at him in surprise. Alexander sighed quietly. This was planned? For what? I don't know yet. Another painful wave swept through Leo. He bit his lip hard enough to draw blood. Alexander stepped closer. Look at me. Leo did. I need your permission. His breathing caught. Alexander's voice remained steady. If I don't mark you now, the drug will keep worsening. I won't force you. Leo searched his face. No desire or excitement. Only duty. Somehow, that made it easier. He gave a small nod. Do it. Alexander gently pulled Leo into his arms, resting a hand behind his neck. I'm sorry. Warm breath brushed against Leo's skin. Then, a sharp sting. Leo gasped as Alexander bit the scent gland at the base of his neck, releasing calming alpha pheromones. The overwhelming heat began to ease almost immediately. His racing heartbeat slowed. The room stopped spinning. He let out a shaky breath. It worked. Alexander stepped back at once, putting distance between them. It had to. Before either of them could speak again, the banquet doors burst open. The Emperor Theodore Aurelius. The elderly ruler strode inside with several ministers close behind. His sharp eyes landed on the fresh bite mark on Leo's neck, then on his son's expression, then on the physician, who had returned in a panic. The room became deathly silent. The physician bowed his head. Your Majesty. The Crown Prince acted to save Master Leo's life. The emperor stared at them for several long moments. Finally, he spoke. Summon the royal council. The ministers exchanged nervous glances. Tonight? Immediately. The emperor turned toward Leo, his expression unreadable. You may return to your chambers for now. My chambers? You cannot leave the palace. Leo's heart dropped. What? Until we determine who orchestrated this attack, you're the safest witness we have. Leo looked helplessly at the prince. Alexander didn't meet his eyes. Instead, he looked at the emperor. Father. The emperor raised a hand, silencing him. The council will decide. An hour later, the doors to the throne room opened. Every senior minister, duke, and royal advisor stood in attendance. The emperor rose from the throne. The crown prince has publicly marked an unmarried omega before the entire imperial court. Murmurs rippled through the hall. There is only one lawful course of action. Leo's chest tightened. The emperor's voice rang through the chamber. The crown prince and Leo Ashford will be married within 7 days. Leo's mind went blank. Beside him, Alexander closed his eyes for the briefest moment. Either of them spoke, either of them smiled. Because both of them knew either had wanted this marriage. The news spread across the capital before sunrise. By breakfast, every newspaper carried the same headline. The Crown Prince to marry Commoner Omega. Leo stared at the paper, then folded it shut. I preferred my life when strangers didn't know my name. The maid serving breakfast gave an awkward smile. I'm sure they'll come to love you, Your Grace. Leo looked around the lavish sitting room. Gold-trimmed furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows, silk curtains. He missed his little apartment above the tea house. He missed the smell of roasted tea leaves. Most of all, he missed being able to walk outside without guards following him. A knock sounded. Come in. The head steward entered with perfect posture. His Highness requests your presence. Leo stood. Where? The etiquette hall. That already sounds exhausting. The steward pretended not to hear. The etiquette instructor was waiting with a stack of books. So you're the tea seller? Leo smiled politely. I own a tea house. You will no longer. Leo's smile faded. The elderly woman circled him slowly. Your posture is wrong. She tapped his shoulders with a fan. You bow too casually. Another tap. You walk too quickly. Tap. You smile too often. Leo blinked. That's a problem? A future crown princess must be elegant. I thought being polite was enough. It isn't. The lesson continued for hours. How to bow, how to sit, which spoon belonged to which course, which duke outranked which marquis, how many steps to remain behind the crown prince. Leo's head pounded. By lunchtime, he could barely remember anyone's title. The instructor finally closed her book. You'll improve. I'm not convinced. You don't have a choice. Neither of them found that funny. The palace gardens were blessedly quiet. Leo escaped there after the lesson, hoping for a few peaceful minutes. Instead, he found 3 beautifully dressed omegas waiting beside the fountain. Each wore expensive silks. They looked at him as though he tracked mud across the palace carpets. One smiled. It wasn't friendly. So? You're the famous tea seller. Leo stopped walking. I have a name. So do servants. Another laughed. I heard he cried during etiquette lessons. He doesn't even know how to dance. I heard he trapped His Highness during his heat. Leo kept his expression calm. I was drugged. So you claim. My physician confirmed it. The tallest omega stepped closer. Funny how convenient that is. Leo met his eyes. If you have something to say, say it plainly. The omega's smile disappeared. You stole someone else's place. I didn't ask to marry the prince. But you accepted. The emperor ordered it. You could have refused. And committed treason? Silence. The omega looked away first. Leo sighed. I know none of you wanted me here. We didn't. I don't particularly want to be here either. That seemed to catch them off guard. I miss my tea house. For the first time, none of them had an insult ready. Before anyone could speak, a scream echoed through the gardens. Help! Everyone turned. An elderly gardener had collapsed beside a flower bed, clutching his chest. Leo ran. The noble omegas remained frozen. Kneel him up slowly, Leo instructed one of the panicked servants. I don't know what to do. Neither do I. But standing there won't help. He loosened the old man's collar. Go get the royal physician. The servant sprinted away. The gardener struggled to breathe. Leo took his hand. Stay with me. Moments later, hurried footsteps approached. Not the physician, the Crown Prince. He had apparently heard the commotion while passing through the gardens. He immediately assessed the situation. What happened? He collapsed. Alexander knelt beside the gardener without hesitation. The physician finally arrived, examined the old man, then nodded with relief. He'll live. The servants sighed collectively. As the gardener was carried away, the physician looked toward Leo. You kept him calm. I just talked to him. Sometimes that's enough. Alexander's gaze lingered on Leo for a moment. You handled that well. Leo shrugged. He was scared. Most people would have worried about staining their clothes. Leo hadn't even noticed the dirt on his sleeves. Alexander stood. Walk with me. Leo hesitated before following. They walked through the gardens in silence. Finally, Alexander spoke. The palace isn't treating you kindly. Leo laughed softly. That's one way to put it. I expected resistance. I didn't expect quite so much. Another silence. I'll speak with the staff. Leo shook his head. Don't. Alexander looked at him. If you force people to respect me, they'll only resent me more. What do you suggest? I'll earn it. Alexander studied him. You're unusually stubborn. So I've been told. A faint smile tugged at the corner of Alexander's mouth. It disappeared almost instantly. But Leo caught it, and somehow, that tiny crack in Alexander's icy mask felt like the first warm day after a very long winter. Either of them noticed a figure watching from the palace balcony above. Hidden behind heavy curtains, a gloved hand slowly folded a piece of paper. On it was written only 4 words. The first attempt failed. The figure dropped the note into a brazier. The paper curled into ash. A quiet voice murmured into the empty room, then we'll simply try again. The palace had one rule. Breakfast with Emperor Theodore was never optional. Leo learned that on his 5th morning. He stood outside the private dining hall, smoothing invisible wrinkles from his robe. You look like you're preparing for an execution. Leo glanced beside him. The Crown Prince. You make breakfast sound terrifying. It usually is. Leo frowned. You're joking. Alexander didn't answer. That was answer enough. The private dining hall was much smaller than the grand banquet room. Only 6 places were set. Emperor Theodore sat at the head of the table, already halfway through his meal. You're late. We arrived exactly on time, the prince replied. Then you're only emotionally late. Alexander sighed. Leo blinked. Was the emperor teasing his son? The old ruler spotted Leo and smiled warmly. Come, sit. Leo bowed. Good morning, Your Majesty. No formalities before tea. That, at least, was a rule Leo liked. Servants began bringing out breakfast. Fresh bread, fruit, soup, and finally tea. The emperor reached for his cup. Leo froze. His eyes narrowed. Something wasn't right. The tea looked perfect. The color was right. The steam was right. But there was a faint scent beneath the jasmine, almost hidden, bitter and metallic. His heart lurched. No. Before anyone could react, Leo lunged across the table. The porcelain cup flew from the emperor's hand and shattered against the marble floor. The room fell silent. Tea spread across the white tiles. A faint hiss echoed through the hall. Everyone stared. The head servant gasped. The floor. Where the tea had spilled, the polished marble had begun to discolor. The royal physician hurried forward, dipping a silver needle into the puddle. Within seconds, the needle turned black. Poison. The emperor slowly looked at Leo. You smelled it? Leo nodded. I've blended tea since I was a child. The jasmine couldn't completely hide the bitterness. The physician looked horrified. This poison is nearly impossible to detect. The emperor leaned back, and yet my future son-in-law noticed it with a single breath. Alexander looked at Leo. You saved his life. Leo swallowed. I just recognized something that didn't belong. The Emperor laughed. A deep, genuine laugh. I knew choosing your tea wasn't a mistake. The room remained tense. Everyone else looked terrified. The Emperor looked delighted. Sealed the palace. His smile vanished instantly. No one leaves. By noon, every servant who had entered the kitchens was being questioned. The tea leaves were examined. The water tested. Every cook searched. Nothing. It was as though the poison had appeared by magic. Leo sat quietly in one of the palace tea rooms. He couldn't stop replaying the moment. If he'd been looking elsewhere, if he'd just been distracted, the Emperor would be dead. You've been staring at the same cup for 10 minutes. Leo looked up. Alexander stood in the doorway. I was thinking. So was I. Alexander stepped inside. For a moment neither spoke, then thank you. Leo blinked. What? You saved my father. It wasn't intentional. You still did it. Leo smiled faintly. I suppose I did. Alexander walked to the tea shelf. You really identified poison by smell alone? Leo joined him. Tea teaches patience. I don't follow. He picked up a small tin and opened it. Every harvest smells different. He handed it over. Alexander inhaled. It smells like tea. Leo laughed. Exactly. Alexander looked mildly offended. I'm serious. So am I. Leo opened another tin. This one's from the northern mountains. Another. This one grows near the sea. Another. This one was dried over fruitwood instead of cedar. Alexander sniffed each one. They all smell almost identical. To you? Leo gently closed the lids. To me, they're completely different. Alexander studied him for a long moment. So the poison was simply a scent that didn't belong. Silence settled between them, not awkward, just comfortable. Alexander reached for another tin. Teach me. Leo stared. What? About tea. You want lessons? I've spent years drinking it without understanding it. Leo couldn't help smiling. I warn you. What? You're probably terrible at it. Alexander gave him a completely serious look. I excel at most things. Leo laughed. I already like teaching you. For the briefest moment, Alexander almost smiled again. Almost. That evening, someone entered the dark royal kitchens after everyone had gone to bed. A hood concealed the stranger's face. They stopped beside the tea cabinet. Inside, every tin had been replaced after the poisoning. The stranger clicked their tongue. So. A gloved hand produced a small vial of black liquid. Our little tea master has a remarkable nose. The vial disappeared back into the cloak. No matter. The figure turned toward the palace windows glowing against the night sky. If poison won't work. A cold smile formed beneath the hood. We'll simply kill him another way. The palace library was almost empty at sunset. Most nobles had long since retired for dinner, leaving only the soft crackle of the fireplace and the occasional rustle of turning pages. Leo sat cross-legged on the floor. Around him were stacks of books titled Royal Etiquette, Imperial History, and the Laws of Succession. He sighed dramatically. I miss my tea shop. A quiet voice answered from behind him. You've said that 3 times today. Leo looked over his shoulder. Alexander stood in the doorway, still dressed in his black court uniform. His jacket was unbuttoned, and his tie had been loosened for the first time since Leo had met him. You were counting? I happened to hear. Leo closed another book. History is exhausting. It's important. So is sleep. Alexander walked farther inside. You skipped dinner. I wasn't hungry. That's unlike you. Leo raised an eyebrow. You've noticed what I eat. Alexander paused. The kitchen reports it. Leo smiled knowingly. Of course they do. Alexander cleared his throat. The Emperor asked me to check on you. I'm sure he did. Another silence. Alexander looked around the library. I didn't expect to find you studying. I don't want to embarrass myself at court. You've embarrassed very few people. My etiquette instructor would disagree. She disagrees with everyone. Leo laughed. I suspected as much. They wandered through the shelves together. Alexander stopped in front of a cabinet. You asked for these? He held up a worn book. Medicinal Herbs of the Eastern Provinces. Leo nodded. I wanted to learn more about poisonous plants. After what happened? What if next time it's not tea? Alexander looked at him carefully. You're still thinking about the poisoning. I think someone wanted your father dead. I agree. And they failed. Yes. Leo closed the book in his hands. People who fail rarely stop trying. Alexander's expression hardened. I know. As they left the library, voices echoed from the nearby corridor. Two young nobles. They hadn't noticed Leo or Alexander yet. A common tea seller becoming crown princess? It's ridiculous. I heard His Highness barely speaks to him. The marriage won't last. Their child won't either. Both men laughed. Leo's smile disappeared. Before he could react, Alexander stepped into the hallway. The laughter died instantly. Both nobles turned pale. Why, Your Highness? Alexander's voice was calm. What did you just say? Neither answered. I dislike repeating myself. One noble dropped to his knees. We meant no disrespect. You insulted my future spouse. Silence. You speak ill of an unborn child that doesn't even exist yet. The two men stared at the floor. You will apologize. They immediately bowed toward Leo. We're deeply sorry. Leo shifted awkwardly. It's fine. Alexander looked at him. No, his voice remained quiet. It isn't. He turned back to the nobles. You are relieved of your court invitations for the rest of your lives. Their faces drained of color. Your Highness, please, if I hear either of you speak of Leo that way again. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The nobles fled. Leo watched them disappear. You didn't have to do that. They insulted you. I'm getting used to it. You shouldn't have to. Leo looked at him. It was the first time Alexander had openly defended him, not because the emperor ordered him to, or because of duty, but because he'd wanted to. That night, Leo couldn't sleep. He wandered into the small tea room attached to his palace residence. Moonlight spilled through the windows. He quietly prepared a pot of jasmine. The familiar movements calmed him. Heat the water. Measure the leaves. Wait. The door slid open. Alexander stood there. I thought I might find you here. Leo smiled. Couldn't sleep? No, either could I. Without asking, Leo poured a second cup. Alexander accepted it. They drank in comfortable silence. After several minutes, Alexander finally spoke. I've never thanked you properly. For what? For saving my father. Leo looked into his cup. I didn't save him alone. You noticed what no one else did. I just know tea. Alexander shook his head. You keep saying that. Because it's true. No, Leo looked up. Alexander met his eyes. You notice people. Leo frowned slightly. The gardener. The servants. My father. Alexander wrapped both hands around the warm cup. You pay attention. No one had ever described Leo that way before. He'd always thought he was ordinary, I suppose, Leo said quietly. Someone has to. Alexander nodded once. Then, almost absent-mindedly, he reached for another pastry on the table and placed it beside Leo's teacup. You skipped dinner. Leo looked at the pastry, then at Alexander. A smile slowly spread across his face. So, you really were paying attention. Alexander froze. For the first time since they'd met, a faint hint of color touched the tips of his ears. He lifted his teacup, pretending to be far more interested in the jasmine than the omega sitting across from him. Leo hid a grin behind his own cup. Maybe Alexander Aurelius wasn't quite as cold as everyone believed. The palace clock chimed midnight. Leo blinked as another wave of dizziness washed over him. His teacup slipped from his fingers, rattling against the saucer. Alexander set his own cup down immediately. Leo. I'm fine. He wasn't. His cheeks burned. His breathing came quicker than it should, and a familiar sweetness drifted into the room. Leo's expression changed. No, Alexander's eyes narrowed. You recognize it. Leo nodded weakly. The drug. It never completely left my system. He gripped the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. I thought it was over. Alexander was already on his feet. I'll summon the physician. The physician arrived within minutes. After a brief examination, his expression became grave. The heat-inducing drug wasn't fully purged from Lord Leo's body. Alexander frowned. What does that mean? It remained dormant. And now? The emotional and physical strain of recent weeks appears to have triggered it again. Leo lowered his head, embarrassed. I'm sorry. You've apologized enough, Alexander said quietly. The physician hesitated before speaking again. This episode is stronger than the first. Suppressants? They won't work. The room fell silent. Alexander already knew the answer. Still, he asked, there isn't another treatment? The physician looked down. No, Your Highness. I see. The physician bowed and quietly excused himself, leaving the two of them alone. Silence settled over the tea room. Leo stared at the floor. I hate this. Alexander walked closer but kept a respectful distance. So do I. Leo laughed bitterly. What terrible luck. It isn't luck. Leo looked up. Someone did this to you. Another wave of heat rolled through him. His breathing faltered. Alexander closed his eyes for a brief moment before speaking. I won't make this decision for you. Leo waited. If you tell me to leave, I'll leave. If you tell me to stay, I'll stay. No matter what happens afterward. Leo searched his face. There was no expectation, no pressure, only quiet patience. His vision blurred, not from the drug this time, from exhaustion, from weeks of pretending everything was fine. I don't want to be alone. The words came out barely above a whisper. Alexander stepped closer. Is that your decision? Leo met his eyes and slowly nodded. Yes. Alexander gently reached for his hand. Their fingers intertwined. I'll take care of you. Leo's shoulders finally relaxed. For the first time since the banquet, he felt safe. Alexander brushed a loose strand of hair away from Leo's face. Then trust me. Leo closed his eyes and leaned into the touch. Outside, rain began to patter softly against the palace windows. The candles flickered in the quiet tea room. The door slid shut, and the storm carried the rest of the night into silence. 3 weeks had passed since that night. For the first time since arriving at the palace, Leo settled into something resembling a routine. Mornings were spent suffering through etiquette lessons. Afternoons belonged to the palace gardens or the library. Evenings somehow always ended with tea. Sometimes Alexander arrived. Sometimes he didn't. But Leo found himself preparing 2 cups anyway. He told himself it was simply good manners. He tried not to think too hard about why. He was disappointed on the nights only 1 cup was used. You've added honey. Alexander lifted his teacup, taking another sip. Leo looked up from arranging dried flowers on the table. You noticed. It's sweeter. I thought you looked tired. Alexander blinked. So? Honey helps soothe a sore throat. You've been speaking at council meetings all day. For a moment, Alexander simply stared at him. Thank you. Leo smiled. You don't have to thank me every time I make tea. I wasn't thanking you for the tea. Before Leo could ask what he meant, a servant hurried into the room. Your Highness. The servant bowed deeply. The council meeting begins in 10 minutes. Alexander stood. As he reached the door, he paused. Don't wait up tonight. Leo tilted his head. I wasn't planning to. Good. Alexander laughed. Leo looked at the untouched second pastry on the table. He quietly wrapped it in a napkin, just in case. The next morning, the smell hit him before he even opened his eyes. Bread. Freshly baked. Usually one of his favorite scents. Today, his stomach rolled violently. Leo barely made it out of bed before rushing toward the washroom. An hour later, his maid looked worried. You've hardly eaten anything. I'm trying. Another wave of nausea hit. Leo pushed the tray away. I can't. The maid frowned. I'll call the physician. It's probably something I ate. You've said that for 3 days. Have I? Yes. The royal physician arrived before noon. He smiled reassuringly as he checked Leo's pulse. Have you been dizzy? Sometimes. Tired? Constantly. Nauseous? Leo sighed. Enough that I never want to see bread again. The physician chuckled softly. I see. He continued examining Leo for several moments. Then, his smile widened. Congratulations. Leo blinked. For what? The physician looked genuinely surprised. Your Grace. You're expecting. Silence. Leo stared. He laughed nervously. That's impossible. It isn't. The physician placed a gentle hand over Leo's wrist again. You are carrying a child. Leo's mind went completely blank. A baby. His baby. Alexander's baby. Oh. That was all he could manage. The news reached the emperor first. Within minutes, the palace erupted into celebration. Servants hurried through the halls carrying flowers. Bells rang from the palace chapel. The royal cooks immediately began planning a feast. Leo watched the chaos from his sitting room. What did I do? His maid smiled. You've secured the royal succession. Alexander arrived just before sunset. He entered without his usual composure. You wanted to see me? Leo looked up from the window. I didn't. The physician did. The physician quietly stepped forward. Your Highness. He bowed. I have wonderful news. Alexander looked between them. Leo is with child. Silence. Alexander didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even blink. Leo suddenly became very interested in the pattern on the carpet. Finally, Alexander exhaled slowly. Are you certain? Completely. The physician handed him the medical report before leaving them alone. The room fell silent again. Either knew what to say. Leo finally broke it. So? Alexander looked at him. We're having a baby. Yes. I don't know how I feel. Neither do I. Leo laughed quietly. Well. At least we're confused together. To Leo's surprise, Alexander actually smiled. Not the tiny, almost smile he'd caught before. A real one, small, brief, but unmistakably genuine. I suppose we are. A knock interrupted them. The emperor swept into the room, beaming. There you are. Without warning, he embraced Leo. My dear child. Leo froze. Your Majesty? You've made me a grandfather. I helped, Alexander said dryly. The emperor ignored him completely. Turning back to Leo, he said, from this day forward, your safety is the kingdom's highest priority. His smile faded. He looked at his son. Double the palace guard. It will be done. No, the emperor's voice became grim. Triple it. Leo frowned. Is that really necessary? The emperor looked him straight in the eye. You've become more than my future child-in-law. He gently rested a hand over Leo's stomach. You are carrying the future of the empire. A chill ran down Leo's spine. He hadn't thought of it that way. To him, it was just a baby. To everyone else, it was the next heir to the throne. That same night, a cloaked figure stood atop the palace walls, watching the lights glow in the royal residence. Another figure approached from the shadows. The rumors are true? They are. The Omega is pregnant. A long silence. Then the second figure spoke. So? A dagger glinted in the moonlight. The child must die before it's born. The first figure nodded. And if Alexander gets in the way? The dagger disappeared beneath the cloak. Then the empire will mourn 2 funerals instead. Leo woke to the scent of jasmine. For one blissful moment, he forgot where he was. The bed was softer than the one above his tea house. The curtains were embroidered with golden threads. The room was quiet. Then reality returned. The palace. Alexander Aurelius. The physician's smile. You're expecting. Leo instinctively rested a hand over his stomach. Hello. The word felt strange. There was no answer, of course. Only a warmth in his chest he hadn't expected. A knock came at the door. Come in. His maid entered with a bright smile. Good morning, Your Grace. How are you feeling? Hungry. She gasped dramatically. Finally. Within minutes, the table was filled with breakfast. Fresh fruit, rice porridge, steamed buns. Leo looked at the bread and immediately pushed it away. His maid quietly replaced it with sliced oranges. You remembered. You nearly cried when you smelled bread yesterday. I did not. You absolutely did. Leo sighed. Let's pretend that never happened. She smiled. As you wish. Across the palace, Alexander sat through another council meeting. A minister droned on about border taxes. Alexander heard none of it. Instead, his thoughts drifted. A child. His child. He had spent years preparing to become emperor. No one had prepared him to become a father. Your Highness? Alexander blinked. The entire council was staring at him. The chancellor cleared his throat. Your opinion? Alexander looked at the map on the table. Increase the patrols. The minister frowned. We were discussing wheat imports. A few nobles coughed to hide their laughter. Alexander calmly folded his hands. Then increased those as well. Even the chancellor looked confused. That afternoon, the emperor found his son alone in the training yard. You missed a target. Alexander lowered his sword. I was distracted. I noticed. The emperor smiled knowingly. Thinking about the baby? Alexander didn't answer. The emperor laughed. You've worn that expression only twice. When your mother died. And now. Alexander looked down at his sword. I don't know if I'll be a good father. The emperor's smile softened. None of us do. You always seemed certain. I was terrified. Alexander looked up. You? I dropped you the first time I tried to carry you. Silence. You what? Onto a very expensive carpet. Alexander stared. The emperor burst into laughter. You survived. I wasn't even aware of this. Your mother threatened to tell you every year. For the first time in days, Alexander laughed. It was quiet, but genuine. The emperor watched with satisfaction. See? You'll manage. Meanwhile, Leo wandered through the palace gardens. He'd finally been allowed outside again after repeated complaints about feeling trapped indoors. The spring flowers were in full bloom, birds chirped overhead. For once, the palace felt peaceful. You shouldn't be alone. Leo turned. The captain of the royal guard approached with 2 soldiers. I thought you were guarding the gates. We're guarding you now. Leo sighed. I was hoping for 5 minutes without someone watching me. Impossible. Wonderful. The captain smiled apologetically. His Highness's orders. Leo couldn't even complain, not after everything that had happened. As they reached a small stone bridge over the palace pond, Leo stopped. Something felt wrong. The garden was too quiet. No birds, no insects. Even the breeze had disappeared. Captain. The guard instantly noticed Leo's expression. What is it? I don't know. A sharp whistle cut through the air. Down. The captain tackled Leo to the ground. A black arrow shot past where Leo's head had been a heartbeat earlier. It buried itself deep into a cherry tree. Protect his grace. More arrows rained from the rooftops. The guards formed a shield around Leo. Move. They rushed toward the palace. Another arrow struck the stone path inches from Leo's feet. A third grazed one guard's shoulder. The captain drew his sword. Archers on the eastern roof. Before the guards could pursue them, the attackers vanished, as though they'd never been there. Alexander was halfway through signing documents when the doors burst open. The captain dropped to one knee. Your Highness. Alexander stood immediately. What happened? An assassination attempt. His face went completely still. Leo? Unharmed. Alexander was already walking. No, running. Servants leaped out of his way as he crossed the palace. He reached Leo's chambers moments later. Leo looked up from a chair where the physician was checking him over. You ran. Alexander ignored the observation. Are you hurt? I'm fine. Show me. Leo blinked. What? Alexander stepped closer, looking him over himself. A tiny scratch marked Leo's wrist where he'd scraped the ground. Alexander gently took his hand. This? It's barely a scratch. The physician smiled. His grace is perfectly healthy. Alexander let out a slow breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Only then did Leo notice. His hands were trembling. You were worried. Alexander released his wrist. Yes. It was the first time he'd admitted it so openly. Leo's chest tightened. Before either of them could speak again, a guard hurried into the room. Your Highness. The guard's expression was grim. We recovered one of the arrows. The captain handed it over. Alexander examined the black shaft. His eyes narrowed. There was poison on the arrowhead. The room fell silent. The captain swallowed. If it had struck. The physician finished the thought. Either Lord Leo nor the baby would have survived. Alexander slowly closed his hand around the arrow until the wood creaked. His voice was colder than winter. Seal the palace. Every guard straightened. No one enters. No one leaves. Find whoever did this. He looked toward the palace windows, his expression unreadable. And if they resist? His gray eyes hardened. They will wish they hadn't. The palace had changed. Leo noticed it the moment he stepped outside. More guards. Fewer servants wandering the halls. Every corridor was searched before he entered. Every meal was tasted before it reached his table. The failed assassination had turned the palace into a fortress. Leo wasn't sure whether to feel safer. Or more trapped. One more bite. I can't. You said that 5 bites ago. Leo looked helplessly at the bowl of rice porridge. His maid crossed her arms. The physician said you have to eat. The physician isn't the one who's nauseous. The baby is. Leo sighed dramatically. The baby has excellent timing. Just then, the door opened. Crown Prince Alexander Aurelius stepped inside. His eyes immediately landed on the untouched breakfast. You skipped another meal. Leo looked at his maid. You report everything to him? She bowed. I report to His Highness. Betrayer. She smiled without the slightest hint of guilt. Alexander walked over and sat opposite Leo. Without a word, he picked up the spoon. Leo blinked. What are you doing? Negotiating. With porridge? With you. Leo couldn't help laughing. Alexander scooped a small spoonful and held it out. 1 bite. Leo stared. You cannot be serious. I am. The maid quietly covered her mouth to hide a smile. Leo looked from the spoon to Alexander's completely serious face. You're impossible. So I've been told. After a long moment, Leo accepted the bite. There. Alexander set the spoon down. You survived. I hate that you're right. Later that afternoon, a royal servant approached Leo in the palace gardens. Your Grace. He bowed deeply. Someone wishes to see you. Who? The servant hesitated. Her Majesty, Dowager Queen Helena Aurelius. Leo frowned. The Dowager Queen? The servant nodded. Her Majesty requested that you come alone. Dowager Queen Helena Aurelius's residence sat in the oldest part of the palace. Unlike the grand halls of the main palace, it felt quiet, forgotten. Leo was led into a sunlit sitting room filled with books and flowering plants. Dowager Queen Helena Aurelius sat beside the window, carefully trimming a white rose. Her silver hair was elegantly pinned back, and despite her age, she carried herself with effortless grace. Years had softened her features but not the sharpness in her sapphire blue eyes. Without looking up, she spoke. So, you're the tea master? Leo bowed respectfully. Your Majesty. You smell like jasmine. I own a tea house. I know. Queen Helena finally lifted her gaze to him. Her keen eyes studied him for a long moment before a faint smile touched her lips. You have kind eyes. Leo wasn't sure how to respond. Queen Helena gestured to the chair across from her. Sit. Tea had already been prepared. Leo instinctively reached for the teapot. May I? Queen Helena inclined her head. Please. He poured the tea with practiced hands. She watched every movement in silence. You've done this thousands of times. Probably. She lifted the cup and took a slow sip. Excellent. Leo smiled. Thank you. For several peaceful minutes, they simply shared tea. Then Queen Helena gently placed her cup onto its saucer. Alexander trusts you. Leo looked up. I don't know about that. He does. She gazed out the window toward the palace gardens. He simply hasn't realized it yet. Leo followed her gaze. The palace gardens stretched below them. It was beautiful, peaceful yet deceptive. The queen's expression darkened. Listen carefully. Her tone made Leo's stomach tighten. This palace has buried more heirs than history remembers. Leo frowned. What do you mean? The official records lie. She reached into a drawer and removed a faded portrait. It showed a young prince holding a laughing little boy. That was Theodore's older brother. Leo looked closer. I've never heard of him. You weren't meant to. The queen's fingers tightened around the frame. He died before his 10th birthday. Illness? She gave a bitter smile. That's what the history books say. Leo slowly looked back at her. He was murdered. The queen nodded. So were 2 royal cousins. And an infant princess. A chill ran through Leo. Why? Power. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Every generation, someone tries to reshape the line of succession. Leo instinctively rested a hand over his stomach. The queen noticed. Exactly. She leaned forward. Your child isn't simply a baby. He is a threat. To someone. Leo's heartbeat quickened. Do you know who? The queen looked toward the closed doors, then back at Leo. I have suspected someone for years. Who? She opened her mouth. A sharp crash echoed from the hallway. The doors burst open. A maid stumbled inside, pale with terror. Your Majesty. Before she could finish, the queen suddenly gasped. Her teacup slipped from her fingers. It shattered across the floor. Leo was already beside her. Your Majesty? Her breathing became shallow. Her hands trembled. She gripped Leo's sleeve with surprising strength. Trust. She struggled for air. No one. Her eyes widened. Her voice broke. She never finished the sentence. The queen collapsed into Leo's arms. Someone called a physician. Servants rushed into the room. Footsteps thundered through the corridors. Alexander arrived moments later, his face draining of color as he saw Leo kneeling beside the queen. The royal physician checked her pulse. The room fell completely silent. Then he slowly lowered his hand. She's gone. No one spoke. Leo looked at the untouched teacup on the table. His eyes narrowed. The faint scent beneath the tea. It was bitter. Metallic. Just like before. Someone hadn't just silenced the queen. They had killed the only person who was about to reveal the truth. The palace was draped in white. Silk banners fluttered from every balcony. The bells that had once celebrated Leo's pregnancy now tolled for Dowager Queen Helena Aurelius. The halls were gravely silent. Servants spoke in hushed whispers. Even the palace gardens seemed unnaturally still. Leo stood at the back of the memorial hall, dressed in black ceremonial robes. His hands were folded in front of him, but his thoughts refused to settle. Trust. No one. Queen Helena's final words replayed in his mind again and again. She had been trying to reveal a name. Someone had made sure she never could. After the ceremony, Emperor Theodore dismissed the court. Only a handful of people remained in the council chamber. Alexander, Leo, the royal chancellor, the captain of the royal guard, the royal physician, the commander of the Imperial Intelligence Bureau. The emperor's usually warm expression had vanished. Report. The captain stepped forward. We questioned every servant assigned to Queen Helena's residence. And no one witnessed anyone tampering with her tea. The emperor frowned. The tea leaves? Untouched. The kettle? Clean. The cups? The captain hesitated. Also clean. Leo looked up. That's impossible. Every eye turned toward him. Leo walked to the center of the room. If the poison wasn't in the tea. He looked at the shattered teacup that had been carefully collected as evidence. Then it was somewhere else. Alexander folded his arms. What are you thinking? Leo closed his eyes, replaying the afternoon in his memory. Leo had poured the tea himself. She had taken the first sip. She had spoken normally. Then, she had paused, reached for the cup again, and only after her second sip had she collapsed. Leo's eyes snapped open. The saucer. Silence. Everyone stared. Leo continued. The poison wasn't in the tea. It was painted onto the rim of the cup. The first sip dissolved only a little. The second released enough to kill her. The physician's eyes widened. That's possible. Alexander immediately looked toward the captain. Check every piece of the tea set. Immediately. An hour later, the captain returned carrying a small porcelain saucer wrapped in cloth. There. He pointed to an almost invisible streak along the edge. The physician scraped a tiny amount onto a silver needle. The needle turned black. Poison. The room fell silent. The emperor slowly looked at Leo. You found it. Leo shook his head. I just remembered. Alexander couldn't hide the admiration in his eyes. You noticed details everyone else missed. Leo smiled weakly. I wish I hadn't had the chance. The investigation moved quickly. Every servant who had entered Queen Helena's residence was questioned again. One name appeared repeatedly. Lord Victor Harrow, one of Alexander's senior advisors. He had personally delivered official documents to the Queen shortly before Leo arrived. Alexander frowned. Bring him here. The captain bowed. At once. An hour passed. Then another. Finally, the captain returned alone. Your Majesty. Alexander's expression darkened. He fled. The room erupted. What? When? How? The captain placed a sealed leather satchel onto the council table. We found this in Lord Harrow's chambers. Alexander opened it. Inside were maps, letters, royal records, and one document immediately caught his attention: the imperial law of succession. Several passages had been marked in red ink. The emperor frowned. Why would he steal this? The intelligence commander answered quietly. Because he wasn't running away. He was preparing. Leo looked at the maps. They weren't maps of the capital. They showed noble territories, military routes. This wasn't the work of a lone assassin. It was the beginning of something much larger. Alexander slowly rolled the maps shut. This isn't over. No, the emperor's face grew grim. It has only begun. That night, far beyond the palace walls, a lone rider galloped through the forest beneath the moonlight. He finally reached an abandoned monastery hidden deep within the mountains. Inside, hooded figures waited around a long stone table. Lord Victor Harrow removed his cloak and knelt. I escaped. A voice emerged from the shadows. And the queen? Dead. The Omega? Alive. A long silence followed. Then the unseen figure spoke again. The child still lives. Yes. The figure slowly stood. Only a gloved hand became visible in the candlelight. Then Phase 2 begins. The hand rested on a map of the empire. Not just the palace. The entire empire. One by one, black game pieces were placed over the provinces, each marked with the crest of a different noble house. The voice echoed through the chamber. When the child is born, we will no longer be fighting for a throne. We will be fighting for an empire. Rain poured over the imperial palace. Thunder rolled across the capital, shaking the stained glass windows of the council chamber. No one spoke, not after what they had learned. Lord Victor Harrow had escaped. The conspiracy stretched far beyond the palace, and somewhere in the empire, powerful nobles were already preparing for war. 3 days later, life inside the palace continued. At least, it pretended to. Alexander had doubled the guard around Leo's residence. No servant entered without being searched. Every meal was prepared under supervision. Every corridor was patrolled day and night. Leo appreciated the effort, but he couldn't ignore the feeling that someone was always watching. You've become difficult. Leo looked up from the tea tray. Emperor Theodore Aurelius smiled as he accepted a cup. You've started inspecting my tea before I drink it. Leo shrugged. I've become paranoid. I'd call it sensible. Alexander, standing beside the window, folded his arms. I'd call it necessary. The emperor sighed dramatically. My own son has joined the conspiracy against my freedom. Leo laughed. We're trying to keep you alive. I know. The old emperor's smile softened, and I'm grateful. He rested a hand over Leo's shoulder. You've become family, Leo. The words caught him off guard. Family. He hadn't expected to hear that inside a palace built on politics. Before he could respond, a royal carpenter appeared at the door. Your Majesty. The nursery is complete. The Emperor brightened immediately. Excellent. He turned toward Leo. Come. I want you to see it. The nursery occupied a quiet wing overlooking the eastern gardens. Sunlight streamed through wide windows. A carved wooden cradle stood beside the fireplace. Tiny embroidered blankets rested neatly inside. Shelves held beautifully crafted toys. Wooden horses. Handmade dolls. Tiny stuffed rabbits. Leo slowly walked around the room. His fingers brushed the edge of the cradle. It's beautiful. The Emperor smiled proudly. I remembered what Alexander's nursery looked like. Alexander raised an eyebrow. I don't remember any of this. You were too busy chewing on furniture. Leo covered his mouth to hide a laugh. Alexander looked mildly offended. I did not. You absolutely did. For a few precious minutes, the room felt warm, peaceful, almost normal. Then, a palace bell rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Alexander's smile disappeared. The captain of the guard rushed into the room. Your Majesty. He bowed hurriedly. A messenger has arrived from the northern frontier. The Emperor frowned. Now? They claim it's urgent. I'll return shortly. He looked at Leo. Stay here. I won't be long. The Emperor and Alexander left with the captain, leaving 2 guards outside the nursery doors. Leo wandered slowly around the room. He smiled as he imagined a tiny child sleeping peacefully in the cradle. I hope. He rested a hand over his stomach. You'll like tea as much as I do. A soft breeze drifted through the room. Leo frowned. The windows were closed. A faint creak echoed behind him. He turned. The nursery door stood slightly open. Hello? No answer. The hallway beyond was silent. 2 silent. Guards? Nothing. His heartbeat quickened. Leo stepped into the corridor. The 2 guards assigned to the nursery lay motionless on the floor, their breathing. He knelt beside one of them. Unconscious. Not dead. Then he heard loud banging noises from the nursery behind him. A chill crawled down his spine. He turned back. The door slowly swung wider. The cheerful room he'd admired only moments ago was no longer untouched. The cradle had been overturned. Blankets lay scattered across the floor. One of the windows had been forced open, letting cold rain blow inside. Someone had searched the room. Deliberately. Leo's gaze landed on the cradle. A single folded piece of parchment rested inside. His hands trembled as he picked it up. Only 1 sentence was written across the page. 1 life for 1 throne. Choose wisely. A cold gust extinguished the candles. At that exact moment, the palace bells began ringing wildly. Not the measured toll of ceremony. The frantic alarm reserved for only one thing: an attack on the imperial palace. Shouts echoed through the corridors. Steel clashed against steel. Alexander's voice rang out somewhere in the distance. Protect the Emperor. Leo looked toward the shattered window. A shadow stood on the roof outside, barely visible through the rain. The figure raised 2 fingers to its hood in a mocking salute, then disappeared into the storm. This is where part 1 ends. But the real nightmare is only beginning. Leo thought surviving a forced royal marriage would be his greatest challenge. He was wrong. Now he's carrying the future heir to the throne, and suddenly the entire empire wants a piece of him. Some will swear to protect him. Others will stop at nothing to make sure his baby is never born. As buried royal secrets resurface, trusted allies become suspects, and a ruthless conspiracy threatens to tear the Aurelius dynasty apart. Alexander must decide how far he'll go to protect the Omega who has quietly stolen his heart. Who can they trust? Who is pulling the strings from the shadows? And when the next assassination attempt comes, will they be ready? Part 2 is already waiting for you on Patreon.